In the pre-dawn darkness of May 2, 2011, a team of U.S. Navy SEALs descended upon a walled compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. Their mission: to capture or kill the world's most wanted terrorist. After a brief firefight, the team's leader radioed back to Washington with a simple message that would close one of history's darkest chapters. For God and country, Geronimo, 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 Geronimo Ikea, enemy killed in action. Osama bin Laden was dead. The man who had orchestrated the deadliest attack on American soil, who had eluded capture for nearly a decade, who had become the haunting face of global terrorism, was gone. But the story of how he rose to such infamy, how he became the leader of al-Qaeda, and how he masterminded the attacks that would forever change our world, begins decades earlier. Osama bin Mohammed bin Awad bin Laden was born in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in 1957, the 17th of 52 children fathered by Mohammed bin Laden, a Yemeni immigrant who had built one of the largest construction companies in Saudi Arabia. The bin Laden group had secured billions in contracts renovating Islam's holiest sites in Mecca and Medina, forging close ties with the Saudi royal family. Yet, despite his family's immense wealth and privilege, Osama's early life was marked by loss. His father died in a plane crash when he was just 10 years old. Though he inherited millions, those who knew him described a quiet, serious child who showed little interest in luxury. Instead, he found purpose in religion, becoming increasingly devout as a teenager. At King Abdulaziz University, bin Laden studied economics and business administration, but his true education came outside the classroom. There, he encountered members of the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic fundamentalist groups. Among his influential professors was Abdullah Azam, a Palestinian scholar who would later become his mentor in jihad. When people see a strong horse and a weak horse, bin Laden would later say, by nature they will like the strong horse. This philosophy, that strength commands respect and loyalty, would guide his transformation from a privileged heir to a ruthless terrorist leader. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 became the catalyst for bin Laden's radicalization. Like thousands of other young Arab men, he saw the conflict as a holy struggle. Muslims defending their land against godless communists. But unlike most foreign fighters, bin Laden brought something invaluable to the cause: access to his family's vast fortune and connections. Arriving in Peshawar, Pakistan in 1980, bin Laden didn't immediately join the fighting. Instead, he leveraged his business acumen and resources, financing the recruitment and transportation of Arab volunteers to Afghanistan. He established guest houses for fighters in Peshawar and helped fund the Maktab al-Khidamat, the services office, which funneled money, arms, and men to the Afghan resistance. I was enraged and went to Afghanistan to see what was happening, bin Laden later recalled. I was surprised by the nature of the people there. I was shocked by the severity of the fighting. By 1984, bin Laden had moved beyond logistics. He crossed into Afghanistan, establishing camps and eventually participating in battles against Soviet forces. Though accounts of his combat experience vary, the myth of the wealthy Saudi who abandoned comfort for the battlefield elevated his status among the Mujahideen. It was during this Afghan jihad that bin Laden forged critical relationships with extremists from across the Muslim world. Among them was Ayman al-Zawahiri, an Egyptian physician and leader in the terrorist group Egyptian Islamic Jihad. Al-Zawahiri would later become bin Laden's deputy and eventually his successor. As the Soviets began withdrawing from Afghanistan in 1989, bin Laden and his associates stood at a crossroads. They had helped defeat a superpower and believed their faith had been vindicated through victory. But the question remained, where would they direct their zeal next? The answer came in 1990, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, prompting an international crisis. As Saddam Hussein's forces threatened Saudi Arabia, the Saudi royal family made a decision that bin Laden would never forgive. They invited American troops onto Saudi soil, home to Islam's two holiest sites, Mecca and Medina. Bin Laden, who had returned to Saudi Arabia, a hero of the Afghan Jihad, offered to defend his homeland with his battle-hardened Arab Mujahideen. The Saudi government declined, opting instead for American protection. For bin Laden, this wasn't merely a rejection, it was a betrayal of Islamic principles. The presence of American troops in the land of the two holy mosques is the greatest aggression, he declared. His criticism of the Saudi monarchy grew increasingly vocal, eventually forcing him to flee to Sudan in 1992, where he established training camps and expanded his network of extremists. Sudan offered bin Laden sanctuary and space to operate, but also isolation from the mainstream Muslim world. During these years, al-Qaeda, the base, began to take formal shape. No longer focused solely on expelling invaders from Muslim lands, bin Laden's vision expanded. The enemy was now America itself. To kill Americans and their allies, civilian and military, is an individual duty for every Muslim who can do it in any country in which it is possible to do it, bin Laden proclaimed in a 1996 fatwa. This dramatic escalation from targeting military occupiers to declaring all Americans fair game marked a turning point in his ideology. Under mounting international pressure, Sudan expelled bin Laden in 1996. He returned to Afghanistan, now largely controlled by the Taliban. There, he found not just refuge, but also powerful allies. Taliban leader Mullah Omar welcomed bin Laden, offering him protection in exchange for financial support and fighters. In the harsh mountains of eastern Afghanistan, bin Laden built a network of camps where recruits received religious indoctrination and military training. Al-Qaeda became a global franchise of terror, with cells operating across multiple continents. Bin Laden's organization had evolved from a guerrilla force fighting Soviets to a sophisticated terrorist network with global reach. On August 7, 1998, al-Qaeda executed nearly simultaneous bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. The attacks killed 224 people, including 12 Americans, and injured thousands more. The precision and coordination of these bombings demonstrated al-Qaeda's growing capabilities. Bin Laden had declared war on America, and now he was showing what that meant. The Clinton administration responded with cruise missile strikes on suspected al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan and a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan. But bin Laden escaped unharmed. The failed attempt to eliminate him only enhanced his mystique among followers. Here was a man who had defied America and lived to tell the tale. 2 years later, al-Qaeda operatives in Yemen bombed the USS Cole, a guided missile destroyer refueling in the port of Aden. The attack killed 17 American sailors and nearly sank the warship. It was a symbolic victory for bin Laden. A small boat carrying explosives had crippled a modern American warship. But these attacks were merely preludes. Within al-Qaeda's camps and safe houses, plans were being developed for an operation so audacious that even some of bin Laden's lieutenants questioned its wisdom. The target was America itself, and the goal was to strike at symbols of American economic and military power in a way that would reverberate throughout history. As the new millennium began, 19 men were selected for this mission. They began entering the United States, enrolling in flight schools, opening bank accounts, and blending into American society. Their leader, Mohammed Atta, maintained contact with al-Qaeda operatives abroad, refining the plan that bin Laden had set in motion. September 11, 2001, dawned clear and bright on the east coast of the United States. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 struck the South Tower. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. And at 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93, likely bound for the U.S. Capitol or White House, plunged into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought back against the hijackers. In the span of less than 2 hours, nearly 3,000 lives were lost. The iconic Twin Towers, symbols of American economic might, collapsed in plumes of dust and debris. The Pentagon, headquarters of the world's most powerful military, burned. And a shocked nation found itself at war with an enemy many Americans had barely heard of before that day. President George W. Bush addressed the nation that evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The world would soon learn that these acts bore the signature of Osama Bin Laden and al-Qaeda. As Americans mourned, intelligence agencies scrambled to confirm what many already suspected. On October 7, 2001, less than a month after the attacks, American and British forces launched Operation Enduring Freedom, targeting al-Qaeda camps and Taliban positions in Afghanistan. The initial military campaign achieved rapid success. Taliban defenses crumbled under the combined weight of coalition air power and Northern Alliance ground forces. By December, the Taliban had been driven from power. Al-Qaeda training camps lay in ruins, but the primary objective, capturing or killing bin Laden, remained unfulfilled. In late November 2001, U.S. intelligence tracked bin Laden to the mountains of Tora Bora near the Pakistan border. For 2 weeks, American aircraft pounded the cave complex while Afghan militias advanced on the ground. Yet, when the dust settled, bin Laden had vanished, slipping across the border into Pakistan's tribal areas. I was the most optimistic of everybody about our chances of catching bin Laden, CIA officer Gary Bernson later recalled, but he managed to get away. The failure at Tora Bora would haunt American counterterrorism efforts for years to come. Bin Laden, the face of 9/11, remained at large, releasing occasional audio and video messages to taunt his pursuers and inspire his followers. In these messages, bin Laden appeared to relish his role as America's most wanted fugitive. The events of September 11th are but a response to the continuous injustice inflicted upon our sons in Palestine, Iraq, Somalia, Southern Sudan, and other places, he declared in October 2001, justifying mass murder as political retaliation. As the hunt for bin Laden continued, the Bush administration expanded its war on terror beyond Afghanistan. In March 2003, American forces invaded Iraq, toppling Saddam Hussein's regime, but also diverting critical resources from the Afghan theater. Bin Laden exploited this strategic shift. From his hiding place, he directed al-Qaeda affiliates to target coalition forces in Iraq, turning the country into a new front for jihad. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the remnants of al-Qaeda regrouped, forging alliances with local militants. By 2005, the trail had gone cold. U.S. intelligence had few actionable leads on bin Laden's whereabouts. Some believed he was hiding in Pakistan's federally administered tribal areas, moving between safe houses under the protection of sympathetic tribes. Others thought he might have fled to Yemen or Somalia, where weak governments provided fertile ground for terrorist groups. For the families of 9/11 victims, bin Laden's continued freedom was a painful reminder that justice remained incomplete. for American policymakers, his elusiveness undermined the narrative of a successful counterterrorism campaign. And for jihadists worldwide, his survival against overwhelming odds seemed almost miraculous. Proof, some believed, of divine protection. As years passed without a capture, some began to question whether Osama bin Laden was still alive. Had he died of natural causes in some remote hideout? Had he been killed in an unreported drone strike? The uncertainty itself became a strategic advantage for al-Qaeda, allowing the organization to invoke their leader's authority, whether he was giving directions or not. But within the halls of the CIA, a small team of analysts remained fixated on finding bin Laden. They meticulously tracked every fragment of intelligence, every reported sighting, every intercepted message that might lead to the world's most wanted man. The breakthrough came not from some dramatic firefight or high-tech surveillance operation, but from painstaking intelligence work. CIA analysts identified a trusted courier used by bin Laden to communicate with the outside world. After months of surveillance, this courier led them to a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, just miles from Pakistan's premier military academy. The compound was unusual, a large walled structure with few windows facing outward, no telephone or internet connections, and residents who burned their trash rather than putting it out for collection. Most tellingly, a tall figure occasionally walked in the compound's garden, but never left the premises. "We had high confidence that a high-value target was living there," recalled a senior intelligence official, "and we assessed that there was a strong probability that target was Osama bin Laden." President Barack Obama was briefed on the intelligence in late 2010. Over the next months, his national security team developed options for action. Some advocated for a drone strike, clean, risk-free for American personnel, but potentially leaving questions about whether bin Laden had actually been killed. Others pushed for sending in special forces, riskier but providing certainty. On April 29, 2011, after multiple planning sessions, Obama made his decision. It's a go. Operation Neptune Spear was set in motion. In the early hours of May 2, 2011, two modified Black Hawk helicopters carrying SEAL Team 6 crossed from Afghanistan into Pakistani airspace. The mission was conducted without notifying Pakistani authorities, reflecting American concerns about potential leaks. The operation nearly ended in disaster when one helicopter crashed in the compound's courtyard due to unexpected air conditions. But the SEALs adapted, breaching the compound and methodically clearing rooms as they searched for their target. On the third floor of the main building, they found him. A tall, bearded man who matched bin Laden's description. When he appeared to reach for a weapon, the SEALs fired, hitting him in the head and chest. After visual identification and a preliminary DNA test, they transmitted the code confirming his death. As news of the raid spread, crowds gathered outside the White House and at Ground Zero in New York, chanting, "USA, USA." For many Americans, especially those who had lost loved ones on September 11th, bin Laden's death represented a measure of justice long delayed. "Justice has been done," President Obama declared in a televised address that night. The man who had orchestrated the murder of thousands of innocents had finally answered for his crimes. Bin Laden's body was flown to the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson in the Arabian Sea. After traditional Islamic funeral rites were performed, he was buried at sea, a decision made to prevent his grave from becoming a shrine for extremists. In the compound, SEALs recovered a treasure trove of intelligence, computer hard drives, documents, and videos revealing details about al-Qaeda's operations and bin Laden's role in recent years. The materials showed a leader still active in planning attacks, but also increasingly isolated and concerned about the organization's future. Osama bin Laden's death marked the end of an era, but not the end of the threats he helped create. Al-Qaeda continued under the leadership of Ayman al-Zawahiri, though increasingly fragmented into regional affiliates. Meanwhile, a new threat emerged from the chaos of Syria and Iraq: the Islamic State, which briefly eclipsed al-Qaeda in brutality and territorial control. Yet bin Laden's legacy extends beyond these organizations. He fundamentally altered how the world views terrorism, transforming it from a tactic used in localized conflicts to a global ideology capable of recruiting across borders and cultures. The 9/11 attacks he orchestrated changed American life in ways both visible and invisible. Airport security, government surveillance, immigration policies, all were transformed in the aftermath. The attacks triggered America's longest war in Afghanistan, which would last nearly 20 years and cost trillions of dollars and thousands of lives. Bin Laden didn't destroy the United States, noted terrorism expert Peter Bergen, but he did succeed in getting the U.S. to destroy itself, to some degree, through overreaction. Indeed, bin Laden himself articulated this strategy. In a 2004 video, he boasted about leading America into costly wars. "We are continuing this policy and bleeding America to the point of bankruptcy." He calculated that each al-Qaeda dollar spent on attacks would cost the U.S. $1 million in security and military response. Beyond the economic cost, the post-9/11 era saw fierce debates about the balance between security and civil liberties. Enhanced interrogation techniques, warrantless surveillance, and military detention all raised profound questions about American values in the face of terrorist threats. The bin Laden manhunt itself raised troubling questions about geopolitical relationships. His presence in Abbottabad, less than a mile from Pakistan's equivalent of West Point, fueled suspicions that elements within Pakistan's intelligence services had protected him. Though Pakistani officials denied knowledge of his whereabouts, the incident strained U.S.-Pakistan relations. For the Muslim world, bin Laden's legacy is particularly complex. While polls consistently showed that the vast majority of Muslims rejected his violent methods, his rhetoric about Western domination and support for corrupt regimes resonated with many. His ability to strike at America, long seen as untouchable, earned him a certain grim respect even among those who deplored his tactics. Yet, bin Laden's greatest miscalculation may have been the Arab Spring of 2011, which began just months before his death. These popular uprisings demonstrated that meaningful change in the Muslim world could come through peaceful protest rather than terrorist violence. Young Arabs took to the streets demanding democracy and dignity, values antithetical to bin Laden's vision of a puritanical caliphate. The 9/11 attacks and America's response also had profound psychological impacts. For Americans, the sudden vulnerability of their homeland shattered a sense of security and exceptionalism. For many Muslims, the subsequent war on terror felt increasingly like a war on Islam itself, despite American protestations to the contrary. In death as in life, bin Laden remains a polarizing figure, condemned as a mass murderer by most, but still venerated as a warrior against Western imperialism by a dangerous minority. His life trajectory, from privileged son of a construction magnate to cave-dwelling terrorist mastermind, continues to baffle and fascinate analysts. How did a man with no formal military training, no standing army, and no state behind him manage to inflict such damage on the world's sole superpower? Asked one former CIA officer. The answer lies partly in his understanding of symbolism and media, partly in his patient strategic vision, and partly in our own vulnerabilities. 2 decades after the September 11th attacks, the world Osama bin Laden helped shape continues to evolve. Al-Qaeda, though diminished, persists in various forms across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. The Taliban, once bin Laden's protectors, have returned to power in Afghanistan following America's withdrawal in 2021. And the ideological currents bin Laden channeled, religious extremism, anti-Western sentiment, and glorification of violence, continue to find new expressions and adherents. Yet time has also revealed the limitations of bin Laden's vision. His dream of uniting Muslims under a Puritan caliphate remains unrealized. His prediction that America would crumble under the weight of prolonged wars proved partially true, but the complete collapse he hoped for never materialized. And his strategy of spectacular attacks has largely given way to more localized terrorism, as security measures have made 9/11-style operations increasingly difficult to execute. Perhaps most significantly, bin Laden failed to win the ideological war for Muslim hearts and minds. Surveys consistently show that support for extremist violence has declined in most Muslim-majority countries since the peak of the post-9/11 era. The generation coming of age today is more likely to seek change through technology, entrepreneurship, and democratic participation than through the nihilistic violence bin Laden championed. Still, as military historian Andrew Bakevich observed, bin Laden forced us to look in the mirror, and we didn't always like what we saw. The questions his attacks raised about American power, about religious extremism, about the costs of security, about the clash of civilizations remain unresolved. In May 2011, as Navy SEALs surrounded his bedroom in Abbottabad, Osama bin Laden's long evasion of justice came to an end. The man who had orchestrated mass murder on an unprecedented scale died as he had caused so many others to die, violently, unexpectedly, and far too soon. But unlike his victims, bin Laden had chosen his path of destruction willingly, embracing an ideology that valued death over life. His physical presence is gone, his body committed to the depths of the Arabian Sea. Yet the ripples of his actions continue to spread outward, touching shores he never visited and generations born after his death. In this sense, the final chapter of Osama bin Laden's story remains unwritten, its full impact still unfolding across our uncertain world.